All right, folks, welcome to the online training session for the event emissions Pronto form that we're asking everybody to start using starting July 1st of 2020. I'm recording this video for folks who were unable to attend the training in person, and I'm going to go kind of quickly through just all these slides and the application itself, showing you what goes where. I'm not gonna pause so much, since you can press the pause button on your computer. Make sure that everything makes sense to you. So please follow along. So the reason that we're here today is to talk about this Pronto form. Why are we here? The CDPHE, which is the regulating body in the state of Colorado for air emissions, is now requiring us to record event-based emissions, to report them, and to permit them. What is an event-based emission? So what we're talking about here are blowdowns of gas that would typically remain in the pipe to the atmosphere. So any process that typically contains process fluid, in this case, gases that we vent to the atmosphere intentionally or unintentionally, we need to record, estimate emissions, report those emissions, and ultimately permit those emissions. Additionally, outside of just following the new state regulations, we now also need to be able to provide visibility to the business unit on what our total facility emissions are, so that we can maintain compliance, so that we know if the next time we unload a well at a facility, it'll push us over a limit. Before now, we didn't have a single tool that existed that could collect that data in a way that could be consumed by other systems rapidly. So our goal here is to create that tool, to be able to feed the information to our other systems, to estimate total facility emissions kind of on the go, so that we can highlight any facilities where we need to operate more carefully or take any other measures. I do want to address the fact that I know there's a little bit of overlap with some of the data that we're asking to collect using this tool. And we are intending to eliminate multi-system efforts as we can. But for the time being and for some period of time, we will have some overlap, particularly well unloading data will be collected in Even as well as this tool until we are completely stood up and confident everything is working smoothly. Next up, what are we talking about? We're talking about a Pronto form, which is a data collection tool. I'll suggest that you pause here if you don't have Pronto forms installed on your phone. You pause this recording and go ahead and download it from the App Store. If you're a Noble employee, use your company single sign-on. If you're not a Noble employee, but you know that you're a user who's been granted access, go ahead and use your vendor email address and log in, attempt to log in. If it doesn't let you, you can say you forgot your password. If that doesn't work, shoot an email to me and we'll make sure that you're set up. All right, so I'm assuming you've got it on your phone now. Pronto form is a data collection tool. It's a good tool for our purpose because it allows us to only ask for the data that we need. We're going to collect data for lots of different types of activities, and we'll have different questions that we need to answer for those activities in order to estimate emissions and report according to our new regulatory requirements. Different types of activities that we'll go through: things like facility or equipment blowdowns or purges, compressor blowdowns, purges, startups, well work, so unloading a well, swabbing a well, blowing down a well, or other unexpected gas releases. You can refer back to this presentation, this PowerPoint, alternatively to this video in the future. Today, I'm also going to walk through the data form on my computer, which will look very similar to how it looks on your phone. So on to the details. This is the first page you're going to see. I'm going to walk through this for this presentation, all on the Pronto form, until we get to the conclusion slides. So follow along on your device, hit pause when you need to, and here we go. So when you open Pronto forms on your phone, you should see 4 little dots. You'll want to click on the forms dot, and you should now have a form called event emissions based on different events in your forum library. If you don't, shoot an email to me and I'll make sure that it gets distributed to you. And if you don't see it, you might drag down your forums list. It'll refresh it and it might pop up here. You'll want to go ahead and click on the event emissions and then say new event emission. So you're seeing here that it's asking for a number of different inputs. The first input that it's going to ask for is where are you? There are a number of different ways to identify where you are. One of the first options is to say where a well at a facility that you're located at. And if you've selected that radio button, you can click on the well list, type in a few letters of a well, select that well. You'll see that it also named the facility that that well lives at. So if you're at a Noble Energy location, that's a pretty good option. I think it's a lot easier to navigate to your facility by saying a well at the facility, since you're going to see all the wells listed on the placard at the gate of the facility. If you are at an NBLX facility, there is also a drop down specific for NBLX permitted facilities. If you are at an NBLX facility that is in the middle of nowhere and not tied to a facility that has an air permit, you would select other and go ahead and type out, I am near these county roads as a description of where you are. We don't need you to pull out a GPS coordinate or be especially specific, but we do need some sort of description so we have an idea of where this activity happened. Additionally, if you hadn't selected a well yet and you are not at an NBLX facility, you can also just type in a location description. However, if you are at a facility, we want you to identify that facility if possible. So that allows us to tie these activities to that facility, roll up the emissions in the appropriate way. The next thing, now that you've said where you are, it's going to ask when. So this is pretty self-explanatory. If you're doing some kind of work, maybe you're performing maintenance on a separator, you're blowing down a pig launcher to receive a pig, you just tap there, it'll auto-populate to the current time. And you can adjust this as you need. You know, if you didn't fill this out as soon as you started your activity, roll this back. I'll say this activity for me started at 12:40 p.m. Hopefully that is fairly self-explanatory. I do want to note that if you do not fill this out as you go, please make mental notes, just what time of day you start performing activities so that you can fill this out down the road. So now that you've said where you are and when you are, we're going to ask, what are you doing? So the way that this application works is that there are a number of different categories that you can select from. If you hit this drop down, you'll see them all pop up. There's blow down or purge. So that's blowing down a vessel to the atmosphere. There's unexpected gas release or other. This is kind of a catch-all for anything that's not going to fit in the other categories that I'm listing. There's the well maintenance flowback. In this instance, that means like unloading a well to return it to service. There's well maintenance swab, well maintenance non-emitting. This is really a category just to capture the good work that we're doing when we don't emit gas to the atmosphere, when typical practice might have involved venting gas to the atmosphere. We're collecting this data just so we can tell the state, hey, look at these good efforts that we're making. There's another category, well blowdown. So that's for activities that involve opening up the well bore that are not flowback or swab. So some other sort of maintenance or P&A activity. There's also a specific compressor blowdown category. Really, this works very similarly to the blowdown or purge, but a little bit more specific in our pick lists when we're talking about compressors. And then finally, Braden head venting. I'm going to go ahead and run through all of the categories here. I'll try to put together a guide that will tell you minutes and seconds of when I talk about each of these if you're just needing to look back at one in particular in the future. I'm going to go ahead and start with the easiest one, unexpected gas release or other. Here, the only thing that we're asking you to do is say what happened. So maybe you came upon a MECO valve that a cow had knocked off, been venting for some time. We'll ask you to put in some sort of end date. It's just really a placeholder. It'll automatically calculate an event duration, and that's it. This does not replace your reporting to GSOC or any other notifications you would perform. However, what this will do is initiate a conversation with a compliance person so that you two can talk together and estimate these gas volumes. So that's it for this one. This is one where we couldn't possibly imagine all the right questions to ask, so we just wanted to come up with a little bit of a placeholder information and then connect you to somebody so you guys can talk it out together. The next category that we're going to talk about is the blowdown and purge. The first question that it's going to ask is, what did you blow down? So we do have a blowdown equipment pick list. If the equipment that you are going to blow down is fairly common, it may be listed in this pick list. So if you click here, you'll see different size tanks, standard size separators, heater treaters, sand separators, oil drums, down to entire facilities, header systems, just well heads above the ground, different size pig launchers. If the equipment that you're blowing down is listed, that's great. You can just select that piece of equipment and move on to the next thing. If your piece of equipment is not listed, click equipment not listed, and it's going to prompt you with two things to estimate the volume of that equipment. It'll prompt you with the length and the diameter. Typical equipment in the oil field looks more or less like a cylinder. So we're just asking you to perform an estimate here, not to get out a tape measure and make a scientific measurement. Let's say it looks like it's about 10 foot long by 6 inches long, whatever it is that I'm blowing down. You'll see down here before I tab out of the 6 inch, you could just type in an estimated volume in terms of cubic feet. A cubic foot is about 7.5 gallons. So if you wanted to imagine roughly how many deep rock water jugs would fit into the piece of equipment, you could do that. I think it's a difficult thing to do. So if you can estimate the length and diameter of your equipment, that's going to be the preferred approach. As soon as I tab out of the equipment length, this is going to disappear because I don't need you to estimate volume when we can calculate it. Another option that we have built in is if you vented multiple pieces of equipment, let's say 6 tanks of the exact same volume, you don't need to make 6 separate entries. You can just say, I did this 6 times for 6 identical pieces of equipment. If it is only 1, then you just put in 1, but we wanted to make it easier so that you would not need to open this and make duplicate entries. The next question that it's going to ask you to answer is, what was your starting pressure? We're asking for the starting pressure when you began your blowdown to the atmosphere, not your blowdown period. So if you were able to blow down some of your pressure to somewhere in the process or to the sales line, we only care once that gas is vented to the atmosphere. Let's say in this instance, the piece of equipment that I was blowing down was at 250 pounds, but I was able to blow down to line pressure, which is 150 on the day. I'll go ahead and type in 150 pounds starting pressure, 0 pound ending pressure. The next question that it's asking is, what is your estimated liquid level? The reason we're asking this question is we get to discount or subtract the volume of that liquid from our emissions estimate. And most equipment in the oil field has designed to hold some amount of liquid in it. So if the separator you're working on, is roughly 40% full, you can type 40% in here, and we will be able to subtract that from our ultimate gas volume vented emission estimation. Once again, I understand you might not know this precisely, but if you're able to make a reasonable estimate, it would be a valuable piece of information to include here. If you have no confidence and you don't feel comfortable making an estimate, you can just place 0 in this field. The next question that it's going to ask is, was a purge required in order to restart to bring the process back online? Or did you have to remove oxygen from the system before you could put the piece of equipment back online? If you answer yes, it's going to ask you for starting and ending pressures. So you can open this table. Let's say you had to purge to 100 pounds and then you blew it down to 9 pounds. You can say you did it that way 9 times. And then maybe you changed your start and ending pressures. You can add rows. Say you did it to 200 pounds down to 9 pounds. You did that another 5 times. You can continue to add rows of start pressure and ending pressure and how many purges you performed at that starting and ending pressure forever. And then just say done when you're done, and you'll see that the information that you added shows up in the table within the form. The next question that we're asking you to answer is, what type of gas was vented? We're breaking it into 3 chunks: HP gas, LP gas, and tank gas. For our purposes, HP means greater than 50 pounds. What that means is, or how to answer that question is, when that piece of equipment that you're blowing down is operating, what pressure does it operate at? As that will help us understand the hydrocarbon and methane content of the gas that's being vented. So in my case, let's say it was an HP separator or a piece of pipe off the HP separator I was working on. We'll say that it was HP gas. The next question it's going to ask is venting duration. This can be a little bit confusing. We're not asking for the time that you rolled up until the time you were done with your work. We're asking about the time that gas was actively blowing out of the piece of equipment that you're working on. So if you click on that, it's going to give you 3 options: less than 1 minute, 1 to 5 minutes, and greater than 5 minutes. If you select less than 1 or 1 to 5, that's the end of the road. If you select greater than 5, it will ask for an estimate of the total duration, just in whole minutes. Let's say in this case, it was 12 minutes of venting. Next, we're going to ask if you were able to route your emissions to a control device. A maintenance tank for our purposes is not a control device. The control device would be something like a enclosed combustor or a flare. I understand this is not commonly an option, but when it is, we want to take credit for it, as we're able to reduce our estimated emissions by 95% in those cases. So if emissions were routed to a control device, you'd select yes. You have a control device type list pop up, and you select your type of control device. However, I understand in most cases this answer will be no, and that's just fine. You won't have to fill in what type of control device that you used or didn't use. Lastly, in the blowdown category, we will ask you to describe your event. The description from my other category that I'd started is still here. I'm going to go ahead and describe this event as blew down a separator. It'll ask you for an end date, same as before. It'll auto-calculate event duration, which is different from the venting duration. Event duration would encapsulate the time from when you began your work to when you completed your work. And then hit submit. That's the end of the blowdown/purge category. Going to go ahead and select a well for our next example. Let's say that we're working at the 70 Ranch BB18611. You'll see once again, it selected the facility that well lives at. My start date staying the same, but I'm going to change my category. Change my category now to well maintenance flowback. As I said earlier, well maintenance flowback is referring to unloading of a well. So it's going to ask a number of questions, some of which are very similar to the questions that were asked for the blowdown or purge. First, were you able to route emissions to a control device? The answer is almost always going to be no, but we want to allow ourselves to take credit if the answer is yes. Then it's just going to collect the data on the flowback event in a table. So we'll be able to add an entry. It'll ask us for the start time of the actual flowback event. Maybe that's the same as the start time when you rolled up, maybe not. It's going to ask you if there's a plunger in the hole, just yes or no. Whether or not there's a plunger in the hole is important for the emission calculation we're allowed to use per EPA guidance. If the plunger is in the hole, we're able to estimate emissions based on the depth to the plunger bumper, as opposed to the entire well bore. So that might be the difference between 5,000 feet and 20,000 feet, which has a significant impact on what our total emissions estimations might be. The next question we ask is, was head gas sold if possible? Yes, no, or not applicable. Yes, if you did it. No, if you didn't. Not applicable if maybe the pressure you found the well under is lower than line pressure and you just weren't able to do that. I'll say yes in this example. Then, what was your tubing pressure when you started? Let's say it was 100 pounds. When did you finish unloading? What was your ending tubing pressure? Maybe you tried to unload it, didn't take, so your ending tubing pressure is 0. Was any liquid produced? It's important for us to know if we're producing significant amounts of liquid to the maintenance tank for our emission calculation. So this is something that we would like you to make an effort to track. If you can't track it or the answer is 0, just enter 0. You can add multiple rows under the well maintenance flowback category. However, I'm guessing if you're performing well maintenance and you're unloading the well and it doesn't take, probably the next thing you're going to do isn't try to unload it all over again, unless you just allow pressure to build up. Maybe it is. But maybe what you do is you bring out a swabbing rig. What you can do here is you can actually change your category from well maintenance flowback to well maintenance swab. It'll ask you a few of the same questions. I'll fix my event description here and say working well with swab rig. It'll ask you if you could route to a control device again. I understand the answer is almost always going to be no. It's going to ask you if you were able to swab to a separator under pressure. The reason we're asking that is so that we can take credit for it. Obviously, if you're swabbing to a separator under pressure, the emissions associated are going to be 0. But in most cases, I understand the answer to this is going to be no as well. Select no here. It'll bring you to that same table that we were looking at, or a similar table to what we were looking at before, but this time to collect data related to your swab runs. If you hit add entry, it's going to ask you, what time did you start running a tool into the hole? Were you able to sell head gas? Let's say in this hypothetical example, we had just tried to unload the well. It didn't come back online. There is no pressure there. So the answer is not applicable. What was our starting tubing pressure? Let's say in this example, it was 0. What was your run-in hole starting depth to fluid level? When your swab crew runs the tool into the hole, they should be able to tell you how far they had to go to hit liquid. This is a valuable parameter for us because, as with the plunger question earlier, this allows us to only estimate the gas volume. So we're wondering what the distance is from the wellhead to where they hit liquid, because that's the gas volume that we're interested in. Let's say they were able to hit liquid 1,000 feet down into the well. The well is pretty loaded up. What was the run into hole end time? And what was the pressure at the end of running the tool into the hole? Probably performing this not under pressure. So let's say it's still 0. Then what time did you start pulling the tool out of the hole? What was the tubing pressure when you started doing that? When were you done pulling the tool out of the hole? And the pressure then, let's say once you closed it, you were able to build up a little bit of pressure. And how much liquid did you produce during your swab run? let's say you're able to produce 2 barrels through the maintenance tank. Let's say you do this a few times, you can add multiple rows, but let's pretend in this example that you swabbed the well and you think that it might come back online. You can pivot back to the well maintenance flowback entry and go ahead and say, all right, we're going to try to just flow the well again, trying to unload the well again. Say the time that you started. Yep, there's still a plunger in the hole. There was no head gas to sell. Pressure has built up to, let's say, 150 pounds now. And then when were you done trying to flow it back to the tank before you turned it to the process? Let's say you were successful this time. The ending tubing pressure, it just came right up to line pressure of 180 pounds that day. And how much liquid did you produce to the maintenance tank? Say 5 barrels. Then you can say done. You'll see here your 2 entries for unloading the well are there, and then your entry for swabbing a well is also still there. It'll ask you for the end date of your activity. Let's go ahead and say that that's now, so 2:59. It'll automatically calculate your event duration and then hit submit. The important thing to highlight here is I understand we're asking for a lot of data. However, if we don't collect the amount of data that we're collecting, we have to make these calculations simple. And when we make these calculations simple, they become conservative and overestimate emissions. On our first stroke of trying to establish what the impact of these new rules would be, it looked like emissions from well unloading and well swabbing were going to significantly impact our operational flexibility at our locations. However, when we were able to refine those calculations by collecting more data, we were able to reduce the impact of these activities on our operational flexibility. So while I appreciate this is a lot to ask, it will do a lot for how we're able to operate our facilities. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next category. We killed 2 birds with 1 stone there. If you didn't notice, going through well maintenance flowback and well maintenance swab. Now we're going to go ahead and hit well maintenance non-emitting. Once again, this is kind of an attaboy category where you might say, what did you do? We were able to hit this well with Certarus. What did we do? We unloaded the well and we're done. That's all that it's asking for. We're not asking you to write a novel. We just want to keep a record of how we were able to unload the well, do well maintenance without emitting so that we can say, hey, state, look at this good work that we're doing. Go ahead and move on to the next category of well bore blowdown. I do want to highlight that if you're just flowing down the well head, let's say you're putting some slick line down and you just had to blow down the lubricator, this category is not for you. That would be under the blowdown or purge category. This category is for when you're blowing down the well bore, either the tubing or the casing for some sort of maintenance or P&A work. If you are unloading the well through a separator system, kind of like you're performing flowback in order to reduce pressure on a well before you kill the well because you're P&Aing, then the well unloading category might actually be the right place for you to go. But if you're just performing a well blowdown to perform maintenance, this is going to be the right place for you to go. So in this case, describe event. I'm going to give a funny one that we have heard a few times and say that I am rocking the gas lift mandrels. The blowdown type here would not be well maintenance, wouldn't be plugging, it would be other. The start time of my activity, say it's right now. Did we blow down the tubing or the casing? Typically, we're going to be blowing down tubing these types of activities. However, rocking the gas lift mandrels is a unique case where we're going to be blowing down the casing. So we go ahead and enter our starting pressure like we've done before. Say we were at 1,000 pounds. If we know it, we want to know that starting depth to fluid level, meaning how far is it from the surface to fluid. Chances are you won't know that unless the well has been monitored recently by Well Whisperer, or for some other reason we know this answer. So if you know it, enter something. If you don't, that's okay. In this case, I'll say I don't know. When were we done with our blowdown? And what was our ending pressure? Let's say we blew down from 1,000 to 800 to try to move those mandrels around. Were we able to route to the control device? You've seen this a few times now. Let's say that we were not. What was our venting duration? Let's say it was less than a minute. The end, press send. Go ahead and move on to the next category of emissions. Let's hit compressor blowdowns. One thing that's important to hear here is that you heard me reference earlier, vendors as well as Noble Energy employees are being trained to use this application. It's not only on the Noble Energy lease operators to log this information. If a vendor is performing the work and they're the person in charge of the activity, then they are expected to log this activity on this application so that we can estimate emissions. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is communication. So we know that somebody is logging the activity and that you aren't both doing it. So category, compressor blowdowns, event, say we blew down a compressor for maintenance. Compressor model, so similar to the equipment pick list on the blowdown side, we've got compressor model. What you'll notice is that these are actually engines. These aren't compressors. It says compressor for this type of engine. We worked this list with Luke Red. It should be pretty complete. If you believe something's missing from it when you're performing this activity, you can select other and then type in, this is my compressor model. And what's going to happen is we're going to have to reach out to you and figure out what's going on and add that to our table. Because unlike the blowdown purge category, if we don't know what the compressor is, we're not estimating the volume any other way. So we're just going to have to fill that gap if we find them. But for this case, let's say that it was actually an EDI compressor. Also, OTA compressor package is the same. But what was our starting pressure? Let's say it was at 150 pounds. We blew it down to atmosphere. We could have said we blew it down to only 30 pounds if we just had to blow it down to restart it or something. In this case, in my example, I'm going to say to atmosphere. What type of gas was it? Let's say this is a little Kubota sales gas compressor. What was purge required before I started back up? The answer is probably yes. This looks exactly the same as the other purge table. One thing that might change about this application, depending on when you see this training, we may have another option in here for you to check if you just do a blow through purge instead of a pressure up, pressure down purge. And in that case, you will check that box if that's what you're performing. In this example, I'm just going to say that I pressured it up to 50 pounds, pressured it down to 5 pounds, did that 3 times, called it good. Were we able to route to control device? The answer is almost always no. I'll pretend it's yes here just so you can see me go through it. Check yes, control device type. We'll say in this case that it was a permanent enclosed flare. Somehow we were able to blow down to. The next question it's going to ask is if a starter is used and the starter uses natural gas, how many starter attempts did we have to go through? So I want to clarify, if we're using instrument air, we don't care about it. If we're using electric, we don't care about it. But if we're using a natural gas starter to spin up the compressor, Then we need to log how many attempts it took so that we can estimate the gas released. Say in this example, it was a cold day. It took me 7 tries to get the compressor to kick back on. The next question you've seen before, venting duration. I'll say it was less than a minute. When did we finish our activity? And then it automatically calculates the event duration. That's the conclusion on this one. The next entry, our next category that we'll go through is our last category, Braden head venting. If you're venting a Braden head, you will be asked to describe what you're doing. So maybe you're doing a Form 17 test. What was your starting surface casing pressure? Say it was 80. What was your ending? You blew it down to 0. If you're performing gas abatement and you actually have a meter, so you know how much gas you're blowing down when you're performing your gas abatement, we're asking for your starting meter reading and your ending meter reading so that we can subtract these and get the total gas vented. Then we've got kind of a just check yourself question here. Was hydrocarbon gas vented? If the answer is no, you really don't need to be filling out this form. This is here in the case that you came upon a well, had some pressure on it, you're relieving that pressure, but maybe it was just liquid in there. It's not a gas blowdown at all. You'd say yes there, or just realize you don't need to fill out this form. So I'll say that hydrocarbon gas, let's say you'd say no there, or realize you don't need to fill out this form. I'll say hydrocarbon gas was vented. How long was it vented for to gas flow end? This should be logged as part of your Form 17 Braden head test. I'll say in this case it was 8 minutes. Were you able to route to a control device? If you're doing a Form 17 test, chances are no. However, if you're performing gas abatement, the chance might be yes. Say no in this case, since I said I was doing a Form 17 test up above. Then end date and event duration, and click submit. So those are all of our entries. I want to point out that there is a slide with the inputs for those different categories within the slide deck, if you want to refer back to that. But first, I'm just going to run through some anticipated frequently asked questions. One, just want to emphasize on the equipment length and diameter. We're asking just for best estimate for equipment that isn't listed in the dropdown. We don't expect you to walk around with a ruler or use measuring tape. We do ask that you do the best that you can. Estimated liquid level. We want to know the amount of the vessel that's currently filled with liquid so that we don't count that as gas when we're blowing down the vessel. This helps us be more accurate and not chew up emissions on our permit by assuming everything is gas. The gas vent characterization, once again, we're breaking this into 3 pieces. We're calling HP gas greater than 50. I understand that probably doesn't mean HP gas to a lot of people, but in terms of our emission estimations, that's where we're drawing the line. There's more methane and less VOCs in HP gas. There's more VOCs and less methane in tank gas. We're just cutting gas into 3 different chunks so that we can estimate our emissions. The estimated total duration of venting, once again, is just the amount of time that gas is blowing to the atmosphere. So if you rolled up on site at 7 in the morning and you worked until 2 in the afternoon, but you only vented gas for 2 minutes in that period, we care about that 2 minutes, not the 7 hours that you spent total working. The purge entries, once again, that's if we're blowing more gas to the atmosphere because we're getting oxygen out before we come back online. A well maintenance flowback means opening the well to the atmosphere for unloading or intermittent steps and swabbing to see if the well will come back online. Additionally, could mean if you're just bringing down the pressure on a well before you bullhead it, that would be the right way to capture that information. Then depth to the fluid level. Once again, this can be a little confusing because people see depth to fluid level. They think we're asking for fluid depth. What we're asking for is a linear space of vapor in the well. So how far do you have to go before you hit the liquid? All right, folks. I just want to say thank you. Without everybody's efforts, we wouldn't be successful. We wouldn't be able to maintain our license to operate. I know the culture at Noble is excellent. We've shown the ability to rise to the occasion before every time that we get asked to do more, even though we don't have more resources. This is a new big lift on all of us in the organization who actually perform work out in the field. Thank you guys so much for your time, and please reach out to me if you have any questions. My name is Sean Higgins. My email is sean.higgins@nvlenergy.com, and my phone number is 303-898-2897. Thank you guys again, and have a good day.